We're going to start recording. Just allowing a few people into the meeting right now through the Zoom format. Let me know in the chat if you're not able to hear me clearly. This is the first presentation in a series from ServeRI aimed to provide technical assistance and support for Rhode Island organizations responding to the AmeriCorps Rhode Island request for proposals. I'm Adam Donaldson, the National Community Service Program Specialist at the Rhode Island Department of Education. I'm responsible for our state's AmeriCorps grant-making process, along with my colleague, Amanda Forget. The picture you see, I'll admit, was before I had this responsibility and a few more gray hairs. I'm going to be providing an introduction to AmeriCorps resources with a focus on the RFP. And while future presentations in the series will be more interactive, talking more with you rather than at you, this one will be pretty much sort of lecture oriented. Additional videos in the series will dive deeper into sections of the AmeriCorps grant application. They'll all be recorded, scripts, transcripts, slides, all available at serverrhode-island.com/grants. Today, questions can be entered into the chat, or you can always email me at adam.donaldson@ride.ri.gov. We'll get a response after the show. So we're going to do three things today. I hope after the presentation that you'll understand the purpose of AmeriCorps, exactly what is it. Then I hope that you'll be able to identify 3 different AmeriCorps resources to support your mission. And finally, I hope you'll feel better about being prepared to respond to the ServeRI RFP. So AmeriCorps is a federal program that works with states and local organizations created with the National Community Service Trust Act in 1993, but its history is rooted in the American idea that of the power of assembly and mobilization for mutual aid. Every year, more than 250,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers serve with organizations working to tackle the nation's most pressing challenges, with people serving in more than 45,000 locations nationwide. AmeriCorps helps make service to others a cornerstone of our national culture. And in Rhode Island, there are annually 400 AmeriCorps members and 2,500 AmeriCorps seniors. AmeriCorps programs in Rhode Island are working to both enrich the lives of those we serve and those who serve by providing a pathway to education and careers post-service. The AmeriCorps member is at the heart of the program. The basic requirements for participation in AmeriCorps are written in the federal legislation. Participants must be aged 17 and older. And while the majority of members are in their 20s, there are current members in Rhode Island serving well into their 80s. Participants must have or be working toward a high school diploma. The majority of AmeriCorps members in Rhode Island do have some college or a college degree. Participants must be citizens or have permanent resident status. AmeriCorps has a specific enrollment process to verify this requirement. Participants must also undergo a thorough criminal history screening, and failure by programs, potentially you, to follow that screening process can result in lost grant funds. Otherwise, the organizations that put the AmeriCorps members into service determine what characteristics and skills that match their program. And you can design a program to address any community need. Educating students for the jobs of the 21st century, supporting veterans and military families, preserving the environment, helping communities recover from disasters, like perhaps a coronavirus. Members perform direct service. This means they have direct contact with the beneficiary of your program. AmeriCorps grants are awarded to a wide variety of programs, but priority is given to programs that can collect data or conduct studies that demonstrate that there is an evidence or rationale for the program being implemented. AmeriCorps members also, through legislation, are required to recruit or support additional volunteers during their service. And ultimately, the experience of your program should include training and reflection to inspire a lifelong commitment to service. AmeriCorps is also very clear about what AmeriCorps members cannot do. For example, attempting to influence legislation, engaging in partisan political activities, assisting, promoting, or deterring union organizing, or engaging in religious instruction, providing a direct benefit to a business. It probably makes sense to you. But we call these AmeriCorps prohibited activities. In addition, an AmeriCorps program cannot aim to supplant volunteer or paid staff that are already at work addressing your community needs. There are many benefits for the AmeriCorps member. Members can receive a living allowance. It varies by program. And your program will provide both soft job skills and specific skills that can be part of their pathway to a new career. Members who complete their service also earn an educational scholarship from the National Service Trust. It's called the ED Award, or AmeriCorps Education Award. The value is linked to Pell Grants, approximately $6,100 for a full year of AmeriCorps service. Many individuals are also called to AmeriCorps for personal, cultural, or religious reasons to volunteer. It's an adventure, and many are looking for a way to meet the moment that we find ourselves in today. If you did not already have some idea of what AmeriCorps is, I hope you have a better understanding now. We're a quarter way through the presentation, and we're gonna take a minute to stretch, get a sip of coffee, check out the chat box. There it is, before we move on. So, 3 different AmeriCorps resources. AmeriCorps is actually a complex collection of unique service programs, but there are 3 branches to which you can apply for resources right now. These are NCCC, Vista, and AmeriCorps State and National. Server I manages the AmeriCorps State and National program locally. Some of these provide people power, and some provide grant funding with those people. Let's talk NCCC, the National Civilian Community Corps. It's a full-time residential program for men and women ages 17 to 26 specifically, who engage in short-term service projects across the country. We like to call them service spikes. NCCC AmeriCorps members travel as a team from Vicksburg, Mississippi to Rhode Island for 6 to 12 weeks to complete projects designed by a project sponsor, which could be you. NCCC is known for disaster recovery efforts and buildings with Habitat for Humanity. Here in Rhode Island, they've worked with land trusts on farm projects, served with environmental education organizations, operated school vacation camps. They can really do anything that the project sponsor imagines. It will be a meaningful service opportunity. The project sponsor provides supervision of the AmeriCorps members and also arranges for housing during the term of the project. There is no grant or financial assistance from AmeriCorps and Triple C. It's a program designed for pure people power. And Triple C would like to complete at least one project in Rhode Island every season or quarterly. And right now, we tend to achieve 2. In particular, the February deployment of AmeriCorps and Triple C has not been a popular choice. So this resource is really waiting for you. We'd be happy to help you learn more about how to apply. The other program I mentioned, AmeriCorps Vista, Volunteers in Service to America. It provides full-time AmeriCorps members to nonprofits, faith-based and other community organizations, public agencies, to create and expand programs that bring low-income individuals and communities out of poverty. It has been and always will be an anti-poverty program. AmeriCorps Vista is a program designed for members to do indirect service or capacity building efforts. Most often, Vistas serve as a single member in a small nonprofit agency or a cohort on the same project, but spread across service sites. There are AmeriCorps Vistas in Rhode Island recruiting volunteers, fundraising, designing new programs, and working on data projects to expand access to the arts, reduce homelessness, prevent opioid abuse, provide health care, increase college enrollment, and many more projects. One consistent goal for every AmeriCorps Vista project must be the sustainability of the project once the Vista service is complete. AmeriCorps awards a certain number of Vista positions to a sponsor and provides the benefits directly to the Vista. The sponsor provides operating and logistics costs, but no financial resources are provided by AmeriCorps. And Vista pays the AmeriCorps member directly. Vista projects are co-developed in North for AmeriCorps located in New Hampshire, and the process begins by submitting a concept paper and then being invited to submit an application. It takes time, but you can start requesting this resource today. And then AmeriCorps State and National, the largest network of AmeriCorps programs where you recruit, train, and place AmeriCorps members to meet critical community needs in education, public safety, health, the environment, you name it. Members perform a range of direct service activities in local communities. Programs are designated national when they operate in multiple states, and those programs apply directly to AmeriCorps. National programs are required to inform state commissions, that's us, ServerI, about their applications, and CNCS or AmeriCorps consults with us before awarding the grants. State programs apply directly to the commission in their state, ServerI. And that's why annually we release an RFP. Organizations receive both funding and the AmeriCorps positions through this process. So in Rhode Island, we have had a tradition of describing how the layers of national service support the AmeriCorps members. And to us, it has always looked like a cake. So I just would take a minute to re-summarize how AmeriCorps Rhode Island programs are structured. There's a federal agency, AmeriCorps, providing grant funds to ServerI and conducting national promotion of the program. ServerI is a state commission for national and community service. We are a pass-through entity, making subawards to local AmeriCorps programs in Rhode Island. We also provide training and technical assistance to those AmeriCorps programs and events to enhance the AmeriCorps members' service experience. In particular, here in Rhode Island, we've hosted an annual civic reflection and social justice program for members that we call Justice Talks. The AmeriCorps program, perhaps you, receives and manages a grant from ServerI, and with that, recruits, trains, places, and supervises a team of AmeriCorps members. In most cases, the program partners with other organizations, schools, agencies, where the member does their service. The service site, we call it, shares the training, support, and supervision responsibility. So, ServerI is the project or the brand name for the public authority responsible for managing AmeriCorps State and National in Rhode Island. In each state, there is a Commission for National Community Service or a governor-appointed volunteer board. Here we are housed at the Rhode Island Department of Education for staffing and administrative systems. The Commissioner of Education, or their designee, by statute in Rhode Island, is the chair of that volunteer board. ServerI adopted a strategic plan for 2020-2023 called our State Service Plan that articulates a mission to catalyze inclusive, equitable service opportunities to strengthen Rhode Island. And we believe that service and volunteer programs do much more than move communities forward. They serve the participants by providing pathways to a new career, education, and additional leadership opportunities. But all you really need to know at this time is that ServerI is responsible for administrating the annual AmeriCorps state grant process. So we are doing great, 44%, halfway through the presentation, and I've been talking rather quickly, so we've only been in here 20 minutes. This is a good time, again, to take a breath. Remember that we identified 3 different AmeriCorps programs and Triple C, Vista, and the AmeriCorps State Program. We're going to really focus now on the RFP that we published. And I encourage you again to use the chat box to ask any specific questions that have come up in the prior presentation. I'm going to do something that's always a little bit tricky now. I'm going to try and switch over to my web browser and make sure that everyone has seen that when you type in serverisland.com and /grants or AmeriCorps grants, it will take you to our web page where all of the information about our RFP can be found. Additional dates where we'll have Zoom-based presentations like this one. Sample worksheets to help you with your application that we'll talk about in a moment. But also the information I mentioned about if you're a multi-state applicant to AmeriCorps, how you can consult with us before you submit your application. If you're interested in AmeriCorps Vista, more information about how you become a sponsor, as well as the dates that concept papers are due. and the AmeriCorps and Triple C information. What does a request for proposal look like with them? When are those due? And how they, in fact, also, although these are now past due, they have presentations quite regularly about their application process. And even how you contact the Pittsburgh campus directly. So all of that information is at serverrhodeisland.com/AmeriCorps grants. There we go. And then we should be back to the presentation. Let's focus on the AmeriCorps RFP. First, you are eligible to apply for AmeriCorps funding. Unless you are a for-profit business, a lobbying organization designated 501c4, or have been convicted of a federal crime, you are eligible to apply for these grants. And I want you to know that you can pursue any area of community need through the AmeriCorps Grant program. It is true that AmeriCorps identifies broad focus areas: disaster services, economic opportunity, education, environmental stewardship, healthy futures, veterans and military families. But really, it's about the community identifying the need. The RFP identifies areas of priority for which 10 bonus points are available in the grant scoring process. These priorities were developed through the state service plan and include education, public health, and other areas, as well as some design features like working together as a collaborative intermediary. That information is in the RFP. But this year, there are also emerging priorities. You already know what they are: advancing racial equity and responding to the coronavirus, and a national initiative that's taking place between AmeriCorps and groups that are called CDFIs. And if you are one, you know what that means. All right. You can refer to the specific priorities again in the RFP. AmeriCorps has a reputation, we need to be honest, for administrative burden and program requirements. I strive to be a strong partner with our programs in providing relief, flexibility, and support. The RFP application identifies these requirements and cites the full terms and conditions from the federal program, also shown here. The RFP requires a program design that places 10 or more AmeriCorps members into the field. It requires personnel time identified in the role of program director. Actual title not important. It requires demonstrated fiscal management capacity. Our grant program is most appropriate for an organization with audited financials and perhaps fiscal staff on salary. You are required to have AmeriCorps members recruit or support additional community volunteers. And AmeriCorps requires following specific criminal history check screening process for the AmeriCorps members and any staff that are charged to the grant. ServerI, in addition, will ask you to attend training and events. We have a pretty robust calendar. Right now, we are meeting virtually every 2 weeks with our AmeriCorps grantees for 1 hour in an effort to stay connected when meeting in person is not advised under COVID-19 response. And finally, I would mention AmeriCorps programs are required to share cost in some grant types. and this starts at about 24%. So you will be sharing the cost of this program. This year, we are addressing two types of grants. A traditional grant called the cost reimbursement grant, where your project budget is approved in the application. And when you incur expenses, you can request payment each month when they align with the budget. May have heard me taking a sip of water. AmeriCorps has a matching requirement that starts at 24%, as we mentioned. Your budget needs to demonstrate through cash or in-kind donation how you're contributing to the program. There's also an education award only grant opportunity. It is a streamlined program. You're provided $800 for each member service year. We'll explain that in a little while. You do not need to report additional expenses. Members do not receive any living allowance, but complete volunteer hours towards earning an education scholarship only. You can request this type of grant for members volunteering the equivalent of 40 hours a week or just a few hours a week. It depends on your program design. The RFP contains detailed steps in the grant process. There's some key steps and dates to highlight. And know that the application is due November 12th, so about 60 days from now. That application goes to a peer review committee. I am not part of that committee, comprised of staff at the Rhode Island Department of Education, the volunteer board I mentioned earlier, the commission, and Rhode Island professionals familiar with national service and the types of programs that we run. The volunteer board or Rhode Island Commission members then vote on the review committee's recommendation during their December meeting, which has been scheduled for the 9th. There are often elements of the application that need clarification or resolution prior to the new year. So those that are approved by the state are then sent in early January to AmeriCorps down in Washington, D.C. AmeriCorps then does a second review of the applications in competition with applicants from across the country. And AmeriCorps makes the final funding decisions. I will say that our recent acceptance rate has been about 50% from the applications that move through Rhode Island to the national competition. AmeriCorps will sometimes contact ServerI for clarification of the applications in March, and notification doesn't occur until May 15th. So it's a long process. Now, applicants that are not funded by AmeriCorps in the national competition are considered for funding made available to ServerI through something called a population formula grant. This pool of resources is extremely limited, and we will fund, however, all the applications that we can based on our review of strength and potential performance. So, how do you start? Where do you focus? ServerI recommends engaging your community, the community to be served, in the application process from the start. We believe the voice and ideas of beneficiaries and community members have value and will increase the success of your program. The RFP describes 3 different procedures depending on whether you currently receive an AmeriCorps grant called continuation, or are a new applicant. We're going to assume that you're a new applicant when we talk today. We ask you to submit an intent to apply form at that serverrhodeisland.com/grants website. And you can email it directly to me or follow the instructions on the form. If you do not already have some of the administrative items that are required, it's time to get started. Getting yourself a DUNS number, registering at the federal SAM website in order to be able to receive federal resources. Instructions are in the RFP. And then you need to start an eGrants account. eGrants is the web-based AmeriCorps Grant and Member Management System. It is old and it does glitch, but it also works, I promise. The first step is to let the system know that you're a new user. You'll need to know your organization's tax ID or EIN when you register and have that DUNS information. Before you commit, I urge you to start gathering information that provides social science evidence for the program that you're proposing as well. And then finally, have your team look at the financial management survey that is an additional required document for the application and assesses your accounting practices and the risk of entrusting public funds to your organization. The application itself consists of several different entries in eGrants. Each is described in the RFP, and future presentations like this will examine some of these specific areas. Let me point out that the narrative section of the application is limited to 10 pages double-spaced text printed out from the grant system eGrants. So you'll take that either as good news or bad news. In developing the application, I have some recommendations. Proceeding in this order, work on a logic model first. Think about performance measures, then your evidence, how AmeriCorps management fits into your program, and then building out the budget. So we're going to go through each one of those a little bit now. Thank you, Amanda, for addressing the chat question. That's why I'm paused. So the logic model is entered in eGrants exactly as a graphic representation of your proposed program. It's the very traditional idea of what a logic model is. And there's a template on our website to assist you as shown in the graphic here. You then also describe the logic model in the application narrative. Some of the key ideas to the logic model are, what is the proposed service activity? What are you actually going to do? And how much of it is delivered? The fancy word is dosage. What are the immediate results or outputs from the activity? Are there things built, people served, trees planted? And what change in knowledge, behavior, or condition occurs? What is the outcome? The logic model, note, is not about changes for the AmeriCorps members. What we're focused on with the logic model is outcomes for the beneficiaries of the activities the AmeriCorps members perform. Every AmeriCorps application also identifies at least one performance measure. one activity output and one outcome from the primary service activities. You can create what is called an applicant determined measure, or refer to a series of national performance measures that are already identified by AmeriCorps. I'm going to emphasize you do not need to use the national measures, but if what you're describing really fits one of the national measures, then it's best, and we will help you with this, to choose the national performance measure. Just as an example, because there will be an entirely separate meeting available to you about this. As an example, in education, an output is the number of students who receive some educational experience. The outcome, with the special code ED5A, is improved academic performance following that experience. In the application, you provide more detail about how you measure improvement. Is it grades in the school context? Is it a test that you administer, etc.? Whatever is relevant to your program. AmeriCorps grants are awarded to organizations proposing to engage AmeriCorps members in evidence-based or evidence-informed interventions. You need to be able to demonstrate a capacity to collect data, and your application will be strengthened if it's rooted in published social science. Server I will provide a training specifically on the topic of evidence. The AmeriCorps has an evidence rating system, and 20 points of the application review are weighted toward this criteria, 20 of 100. To give you some understanding, a moderate rating of evidence means that an evaluator has conducted a quasi-experimental outcome evaluation of the activity that you're proposing. Your application needs to include a rationale, even if it hasn't quite gotten to the moderate level of evidence. On the screen is some text that I'm actually going to read to you just to give you an example of how an application might sound. Studies show that programs that demonstrate increases in academic achievement for English language learners tailor instructional practices to students' needs, understand and use demographic and assessment data, and incorporate a dual focus on English proficiency and course content. Horowitz, A.R., Euro, G., Price, Bow, R. Simon, Uzel, Lewis, Casterly, 2009. There's a citation of the actual report there in the application. So the Adding Up program's three-part approach to math support for English language learners includes, and they would go on to show how what they do is similar to the activity in that report from social science. But this, of course, is an AmeriCorps grant. So as you work through the application, there are opportunities to explain why AmeriCorps is the best resource to address the community need, and your capacity to be compliant with AmeriCorps program requirements. I recommend that you remember this model of AmeriCorps program management. You're taking on a project that includes recruiting, training, placing, and supervising a team of AmeriCorps members. The biggest challenge first-time applicants have in writing their application is that they tell us that they will do these things, but they do not tell us how they will do these things. How will you recruit? How will you train? How will you place the AmeriCorps members? How will you supervise them in their service. These are all parts of the application. And finally, the budget. Again, there will be an entire separate presentation dedicated to reviewing the budget. But I'm sure if you're applying for resources, this is an important topic for you. It's important to be candid and be sure that you understand that this AmeriCorps funding will not cover all of your costs. Your application will include in detail personnel and fringe that support the AmeriCorps program and not the entire organization. Travel, like mileage reimbursement to visit service sites, training, such as certification programs you might participate in, or consultants to train the AmeriCorps members, supplies like AmeriCorps t-shirts, or in these days of pandemic, Zoom accounts, as well as the living allowance for the AmeriCorps members, and other support costs, including the cost of conducting criminal history checks. There are some AmeriCorps benefits like the Education Award, child care resources, and student interest loan payments that are not budgeted items. They're provided directly by AmeriCorps. When designing your AmeriCorps program, you identify both the number of AmeriCorps members that will be placed, but also how many volunteer hours they will complete. AmeriCorps provides service term categories that we also call slot types. 1,700 hours is the traditional slot type, equivalent to a full-time worker over the course of 10 to 12 months. And full-time AmeriCorps members must receive a living allowance totaling at least $15,100 in the next program year. This changes annually. 1,200 hours aligns well with a typical school calendar and days of service that are less than 8 hours. And just as an example, 300 hours often works well with full-time summer-only program designs. You will budget for the living allowance in your application if you're doing a cost reimbursement grant. It is provided by you from both the AmeriCorps grant funding and your own resources. AmeriCorps does not pay the living allowance as it does in the case of Triple C or Vista. AmeriCorps members are volunteers, but in order to support their long-term volunteer position, many programs provide this living allowance to assist with housing, food, and basic needs. The living allowance is not considered a salary or a wage and is paid every 2 weeks or weekly as you choose to the AmeriCorps members, regardless of their activity and number of hours they actually perform. The chart shows the AmeriCorps living allowance requirements for the 2021-2022 program year. You'll see that only a full-time member has a minimum living allowance. So you can propose program designs that don't have living allowance. The ServerI Commission continuously monitors feedback from members, Rhode Island living costs, and program needs, and the availability of funding to promote inclusive and equitable service opportunities. We ask you to consider that a review of economic and workforce studies published over the last 3 years suggests to us that a single adult in Rhode Island requires an income above $27,000 to be basically supportive, and that the minimum wage in Rhode Island has risen to $11.50 an hour. So depending on the local resources available in your community to support program costs, ServerI encourages AmeriCorps programs to provide a living allowance that is higher than the minimum requirement. We actually recommend that a full-time AmeriCorps member receive an amount equal to or higher than $16,300 next year, which is the full amount of federal funding provided by AmeriCorps. Unlike other grant programs that announce that $50,000 is available, AmeriCorps grants provide funding in proportion to the number of AmeriCorps members and their terms of service, right? So you want to know, how much money does this grant provide? So the answer is, it's complicated. First, you need to calculate the number of member service years, that's what we call them, or MSYs, that match your program design. And you do that using the chart in the RFP and shown here. In this example, the proposal includes 4 full-time members. Each of these is valued at 1 MSY. But the plan also includes 24 minimum time or 300-hour slots. Perhaps they're running a summer education program. Doesn't matter. Those slots are not valued, though, at 1 MSY, but a fraction relative to the reduced hours. So you can see in the chart that the math equals a total of 9.08 MSYs. The 9.08 is multiplied by the cost per MSY announced in the RFP. That figure is $16,300. That's the maximum. So the total result is $148,004. Your CNCS share in the application budget that you propose must total this $148,004 or less. And you can always ask for less. Some applicants believe that this makes their proposal more competitive. But what's most important is that you can really execute on your plan and your budget. We mentioned earlier a different type of grant, the education award only, and it is different. You again calculate the number of MSYs, but this time you can only multiply the MSYs by $800. And that would give you a total, in this example, of $7,264. Why would someone do that? Well, remember, in this program type, the AmeriCorps members do not receive a living allowance. They may receive other types of support from your program or be what we think of as more traditional volunteers. You also have a significant reduction in administrative burden. The application itself does not require then a detailed budget or a demonstration of how you're going to match the resources. We know you're going to match the resources. We're only giving you $7,000. And the money is paid based on your enrollment of AmeriCorps members. If your program takes place in a rural community or engages what are federally defined as opportunity youth as the AmeriCorps participants, Server I can discuss with you how you can receive a higher amount of funding per MSY. And by higher amount, I mean $1,000, that sort of thing. I don't mean quite a bit more. At serverisland.com/grants, we provide a sample program budget in an Excel format. I think is really useful. Just take that Excel file and edit away at it to help you with your budget. It's important when developing the budget to understand that it must include costs charged to AmeriCorps, or what's described as CNCS share for Corporation for National and Community Service, and the costs contributed by you, grantee share. You determine the split in every line item. The grantee share can comprise of purchases you make with cash, from other grants or fundraising that you do, or the grantee share can identify in-kind contributions, such as donated supplies, personnel time from your partners, or donated training consultants, just as examples. Your total project budget, though, must be built to have a 24% or higher cost share or match rate. During the program implementation, you will need to achieve this cost share rate in order to fully receive your awarded grant funds. Again, there will be much more detail provided about the budget from ServerEye in a future presentation, but on the screen you'll see that if you were at a 24% match rate in this example that we had before, that would mean that there would be $46,738 coming from resources outside of the AmeriCorps grant itself for the total project costs. So that's really simple, right? Now you know everything you need to know. But perhaps not, since the ServerEye RFP is 66 pages long, including appendices. Be honest, it's something I'm a little embarrassed about, and I can't pretend there is not a barrier to launching a new program. It takes time to learn about AmeriCorps, grant, and member management. But we're here to help, and it really is so powerful. The opportunity to release the idealists in your community and transform the lives of those served and those who serve. AmeriCorps could be the catalyst to achieve your social mission. And ServerEye wants to help you. Our technical assistance goes well beyond the usual grantmaker wall designed for fair competition. When you submit an intent to apply form, be sure also to make an appointment with us to discuss your proposal. There will be additional presentations where we have more interactive discussions about sections of the application. We can deploy our staff and consultants that we have available to answer your questions as you head towards that November 12th deadline. We do have time, and I'd really appreciate the opportunity to have some more interaction instead of me talking at you. I'm going to play a video now while we set up the opportunity for that interaction, and while you think of questions maybe you jotted down along the way and put them into the chat box.
So you have questions about AmeriCorps? Well, you've come to the right place, because we're here to help. First off, let's clear up one thing right away. You might be wondering how to say or spell AmeriCorps. Sometimes people pronounce the P, but don't make that same mistake. AmeriCorps is a live...
Well, that's my fault, because I was trying to use the chat box, and I ruined the whole video vibe.
So you have questions about AmeriCorps? Well, you've come to the right place, because we're here to help. First off, let's clear up one thing right away. You might be wondering how to say or spell AmeriCorps. Sometimes people pronounce the P, but don't make that same mistake. AmeriCorps is alive and well, just spelled with a silent P. So think of Apple Core or Core of the Earth. Now that we have that clear, what exactly is AmeriCorps anyways? AmeriCorps is simply Americans of all ages and backgrounds dedicating their time and skills to get things done. There we go. So how does AmeriCorps get things done? More than 80,000 Americans across the country join AmeriCorps each year, and all of them are tackling different problems in different ways. For example, AmeriCorps members help families attain affordable homes. They mentor students so that they stay in school. Perhaps there is a tornado, a flood, a forest fire, or a hurricane. AmeriCorps members also help communities recover from disasters. There's so many more things that AmeriCorps members do, but if we said it all, we'd be here all day. Why do we call them members, you ask? AmeriCorps members spend anywhere from 3 months to a year dedicating their time and skills to serve. They can volunteer with nonprofits, schools, public agencies, and community and faith-based organizations. And in case you were wondering, there are a few perks AmeriCorps members get, including money to pay for college, student loan deferment, training, living allowance, health benefits, and job opportunities with leading employers. Not too bad, right? All right. What's the purpose of AmeriCorps? Like the military or the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps is a way to serve your country. AmeriCorps members make Americans safer, stronger, and healthier, and they strengthen our communities. But above all, AmeriCorps members get things done. That's it. That's what AmeriCorps is. Learn more about AmeriCorps at AmeriCorps.gov.
So let's explore the chat a little bit. Thanks everyone who came to listen today to me. I haven't seen any, I've seen technical questions about contacting us, but nothing specific about the current RFP or application process, which must mean it's super clear. If there's anyone who wants to unmute and just have some dialogue, we can even stop the recording and just hang out, but you're also welcome to get going to your lunch, start your weekend, etc.